This morning, shocking news is reaching Europe as we learn that Donald Trump's team has been secretly meeting with Ukrainian opposition politicians to plan for the toppling of Zelensky. Team Trump met with Yulia Tymoshenko. This is the former prime minister to Poroshenko. Yes, the old president of Ukraine. Four senior members of Trump's entourage went to Ukraine to meet with Tymoshenko and other leaders of Peter Poroshenko's political party. Discussions were around whether or not Ukraine should hold quick presidential elections. And this is important to understand that under the Ukrainian constitution, they cannot hold elections while under a state of martial law. And importantly, this would cause a lot of problems. And this has been exactly what Russia has been pushing for with this narrative that elections need to be held and that, quote, Zelensky's a dictator, a line that we heard repeated by Donald Trump and other people in his administration. You have to also understand, very importantly, there are tens of thousands of people fighting along the front lines right now. There are millions of refugees outside of Ukraine. The logistics to hold an election while drone strikes and missile strikes are constantly happening, it would be impossibly difficult to manage. And this is also for a similar reason why the UK did not hold elections during the Second World War. But the Trump White House is convinced that if there were elections that Zelensky would lose, despite the fact that he is quite literally the most popular politician who would potentially be running, and his popularity floats somewhere around 70% as of last week. In a poll this week, 44% of Ukrainians polled by Survation said that they would support Zelensky for president. His nearest rival is far behind that. 20 points behind him is Valery Zaluzhny, a former army commander who is now Ukraine's ambassador to Britain. Only 10% backed Poroshenko, and way, way, way behind that is the Tymoshenko, the person that the Trump administration thinks can become president, who garners just 5.7% of support. A Republican expert from the US described it as such. Poroshenko's people and Yulia, they're all talking to Trump world, positioning themselves as people who would be easier to work with, and people who would consent to many of the things that Zelensky is not agreeing to. When Tymoshenko's team was directly asked whether or not this was true, they did not deny it, only saying, quote, "We won't comment on that yet." And Poroshenko's party, the European Solidarity Party, had a much more clever diplomatic way to phrase this, but I really need you to understand it. They say, quote, "Our narrative is not to push for elections, but to secure free and fair, competitive post-war elections in our country." And if you're not really following this closely, Trump's idea is that you would have an immediate ceasefire, which would force elections to immediately happen, which would oust Zelensky. That is the goal, not just of Donald Trump, but also actively of the Russian Federation to remove Zelensky, who is a powerful figure of Ukrainian resistance. Poroshenko's party also added, "It is also logical that any contact do include the presentation of the vision of the President Poroshenko and the European solidarity on the ways to end the war with a just, comprehensive, and lasting peace, on the limits for possible compromises on the negotiating points." We have a US president right now attempting to do regime change for a democratically elected country in Europe. This is the reality of the situation. We have the White House doing the bidding of the Kremlin, and there is no other way to look at this. If you do not see that clearly now, with them cutting off aid to Ukraine, with cutting off intelligence to Ukraine, and now actively trying to destabilize the political stability of Ukraine and force out its democratically elected president in a method that would be unconstitutional under Ukrainian law, and at the same time spreading conspiracy theories about the Ukrainian president that he wants to stay on as a dictator, when he has already laid out to the US that "I will resign immediately if Ukraine gets NATO membership." This is where we're at. And I think we all need to find solidarity with each other in the European Union, across the whole continent, amongst all of the US former allies that are being burned right now. If we do not stand together, we will all fall together. Now, please do some engagement or else no one's going to see, and I think it's very important they do.